Welcome to this new how-to. In this how-to we're gonna look at how you can start the engines of the Junkers JU-52. And I hear you thinking, hey, we already have a video about that. Well, that's not entirely true, because this is the retrofit one, which is completely different. As you can see, the meters are completely different, the interior has been completely revamped, completely modernized. Contains a lot of more radios for navigation purposes, right? It does not only contain the nav1 and com1, but it also contains the ADF, it contains the transponders, it contains a lot of more, I would say, buttons to control the engines, including the propeller low RPM ones. The dashboard itself also changed, right? Meters have already been updated, ILS markers have been added, and warning lights or annotations have been added also to the right side. So a lot of changes, which makes it, I would say, even cooler to look at this aircraft. So what are we going to do? Well, as mentioned, we're going to start the engines, and there's no easier way than to use, of course, the checklist. However, I must warn you, because there are some things which I would say are mentioned in the checklist, and I would say I'm doubting if they're 100% correct, because we will find in a few minutes why. So let's do the testing, right? So let's switch on the batteries. Let's go to the battery generator. They are set okay. And this is one of them. It says, okay, hey, it needs to be on and closed. I tried it, and it also works if they're not on. So keep that in mind, that yeah, it says it's needed, but if you start the engines without, I would say, switching these buttons, it will work. Throttles have been set to idle. This has been set to off, right, to oil. Parking brake, and that's cool, because the parking brake has also a light. If you set the parking brake, the lights will switch on. And you can also see that the, I would say, feet are, I would say, pressed down, which makes sense. Pitot heaters, you can see them here. You can switch them on and off. Battery switch again off. And then we're gonna go to the before start, which is the carburetor heat, which you can change by say switch turning around this wheel. Come on. I would expect the arrow the other side, but it looks like, oh, here it goes, right? So you can change it, and you can see the other meter going down there. So we're gonna set them to 5. Switch on the batteries again. Radio needs to be set to normal, which means left side. And then we've got the lights, and this is a multifunctional light. 1 is the nav on, 2 is both nav and strobes. Then we've got the whole part of setting the radios and the RMIs, which we're gonna skip because they're not strictly necessary. And then we've got the hydraulic pump. And here's where the fun starts, because there's nothing mentioned about the fuel pump. It's also, I would say, in the the other version of the Junkers airplane. There's nothing mentioned about the fuel pump, which you need to switch on. So I switched it on for now. I do think that it's required. Parking brake was set. Fuel selector set to both, and then we've got the quantities which we can check, right? We can look at the oil here and also on the wings. You can see it. Let me do that. Oil can be checked here, and the fuel can be checked here. We leave it as is. We set the altimeter by pressing the letter B on the keyboard, and then we're gonna switch on the anti-collision lights. And then we can start with the engines. The engines, right, the cover needs to be here. And this is where the fun begins also, because it's not clear what's the correct position. If this is the correct position or this, you would expect that this is the correct position. Well, we will figure out in a few minutes. The same is for the fuel wobble pump. We will leave it like this for now. I would say expect that this is the correct position. and then we can start the engines. And starting the engines can be done by this button, but before doing that we need to make sure that the the engine fuel and lubricant supply is set to start position, right? That's the case. And then we've got this one, and it needs to be set to idle cutoff. And that's one other thing I'm doubting, and will show you why. At least during my testing I saw some weird things there. So this is the rest, right? Temperature, fuel meters, some temperature meters. So this being said, also let's switch the button, and you will see it's flowing. It stays stable, but now it goes down again. And when we go to the outside really quick, you will also see that the rotor is not, or the propeller is not running. So how to fix that? Well, that's by simply putting this one fully to the bottom, and of course you can't see it, and set it to rich, which is, I would say, I think it's the normal position, right? Also with the Cessnas, and the same thing is for the RPM. It's set by default to low RPM, but I would say in the modern airplanes it's set to high RPM initially. But if you would set it to low RPM, it will still work. Right, you can see it's working. It's now stabilizing, so the pressure is stabilized, so we can close this one. That's one thing I had with, I would say, starting the aircraft. It looks like that the start positions are not always the same. So if something does not work for you, then validate if this button has been set correctly. So then you can go to max RPM. So they're changing the, I would say, order, and then throttle the engine to 1100 RPM if you want. So this is it, right? So throttling it to 1100 RPM, simply increasing the throttle will also result in increasing the RPM. You can see it works nicely, right? So once we started engine 1, we can of course continue with engine 2 and engine 3. So we're gonna make sure that the positions are set correct. And the other thing which I missed, by the way, that so we need to set this one to running. I missed it here. This one needs to be set to gen, because we can use the generator. And then we're gonna continue our trip with the next engine, right? So we did that piece. We're gonna change the key, and then let's see if it starts or not. You see, in this case it doesn't do anything. That's cool, right? So let's double check if we did everything correctly. So this is me set to start, and it says, hey, the starter, right? You saw it here. It warns you, hey, you're missing the starter. So again, what did you learn? You need to pay attention to this button, because sometimes it flips back to the default setting. So once that's done, right, we can check everything. We set it to high RPM, and we can move this one to run. And then of course we can start the last engine. It's running. You can set it like this, and then we're gonna set like this. You can see the fuel pressure is still, I would say, burning, so that's a fun one. Well, fun one. I don't expect it to be the fun one. You it has to do something with this. You see, I reset it and now I switch it on and now it's, let's say, set correctly. So if you see the fuel light burning here, then switch off the fuel pump and switch it on. It looks like it has no effect on the engine itself because the engine keeps running. So then we're going to continue with the next one, and we almost did everything if I'm correct. So let's see, the engine is running, all kind of good. These are set to rich, which is correct. The only thing I'm asking myself is, okay, but what about the safety switch to off, which is the case, and then see if it's clear. Well, it's not, because the pitot are not done. So that's another thing. If you see this burning, then what do you need to do? Switch on these two and you see now we're green, or clear of the engine, or clear of the errors I should say. Then we should check if there's no amber lights here, which is the case. This one, the generator one, has for some reason is still set to battery, right? So you can switch it to generator if you want. And here you also have the option to switch to the external power. The amplitude meters are set correct. Hydraulic pressure needs to be 1000. Okay, that's this one. It's a little bit higher, right? Around 1000 psi. I'm not sure. It's far too high, but it's in the green, so must be good. Doors are closed. Then we can use the test button, which you can find here, to see if the doors are, or if the lights are burning. I would expect this one to be, let's say, that's far earlier in the process compared to where it is now. So this is where this how-to ends. In this how-to we looked at how you can start the engines of the Junkers JU-52 Retrofit. You see that there were some changes compared to the checklist, and there are massive changes compared to, I would say, the old Junkers JU-52, right? That it has buttons here which you needed to turn. They are all left, or all gone, I should say. As you saw, it was not that hard, although there are some things which you need to keep in mind. Here ends this video again. I hope you liked it. If you liked it, then consider to use the like button. If you've got questions or comments, then feel free to post them in the comment box below. And if you want to stay up to date about new videos I'm posting, then consider subscribing to my channel. Thanks for watching and see you next time.